Lesson 86, midpoint and length of a segment. So if we want to find how long a segment is between 2 points, we can use the Pythagorean Theorem. So let's say we're going between the point 1, 1 and the point 4, 4. And we want to know how long that is. So we can use the Pythagorean Theorem by making a right triangle between the 2 points. So our length is 1, 2, 3 units, and the height is 3. So if we did 3 squared plus 3 squared equals the length that we're missing squared. So to find that hypotenuse there, we do the square root of 18, which is the square root of 9 times the square root of 2, or 3 root 2. So that is the length of that segment. Now there is a way that you can do this using a formula if you have your 2 points. So I wanted to label that 4, 4. So the distance is the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1, that quantity squared, plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1, quantity squared. This is actually the Pythagorean Theorem. So we found the distance between the x's was 3, and we squared it. And then we found the distance between the y's, which was 3, and we squared it. We added them together to get 18, and then we took the square root. And that's the distance formula. So here's an example. If we have 2 points, 2, -2, and 4, -3, we're going to name x sub 1, 2, and y sub 1 is -2. X sub 2 is 4, y sub 2 is -3. We're getting that from our xy point in the points. So to find the distance, we're going to take the square root of x sub 2, which is 4 minus 2 squared, and then we're going to add the difference of y sub 2 and y sub 1, -3 minus -2, and square it. 4 minus 2 is 2, squared is 4, and -3 plus 2 is -1, and then when we square -1, we get 1. So the distance between these 2 points is the square root of 5 units, and that's how far apart those points are. Now we have another formula, which is the midpoint formula. So if we want to find the middle of 2 points, it goes like this. The midpoint equals, and it's going to be a point. It's the average of the 2 x's, so x sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2, and the average of the y's. And it's that point right there. So here's an example where we want to find the midpoint between the point 7, 10 and 5, -4. So x sub 1 is 7, y sub 1 is 10, x sub 2 is 5, y sub 2 is -4. So to find the midpoint, we're going to add the x's. 7 plus 5 is 12, and divide that by 2. And then we will add 10 and -4 to get 6 divided by 2. So the midpoint is 6, 3. And that's the midpoint between those 2 points. Now sometime you might have the 2 points graphed. So, whoops, example 3. Where's my whiteout? There we go. Example 3. So find the midpoint, and we're going to have these points graphed. So go to -2, -1, and 1, 1. So if we wanted to find the midpoint between these, we're going to take the average of the x's. So let's just call x sub 1 is -2, y sub 1 is -1, x sub 2 is 1, y sub 2 is 1. So we're going to have -2 plus 1 is -1 divided by 2, and y sub 1 plus y sub 2 is 0 divided by 2 is 0. So the midpoint is -1/2, 0, and that's going to be right here, -1/2, 0. Okay, so one more example that you might need to do using a figure on a coordinate plane. So example 4 is classify the polygon. And we're going to prove it using the numbers of the points, okay? So here we're going to graph these points. We have 2, 1, and then -1, 0, and -2, -3, and 1, -2. So this is A, B, C, D. We're going to name this one A, B, C, D, connect. This isn't drawn to scale, but we're going to classify. So we know it's a quadrilateral, but we want to know what type. So let's find the lengths of each of these segments. So the length of AB is, we're going to do the distance formula. We're going to take the distance between the x's, so that's 1, 2, 3, and square it. Wait, let me go ahead. We'll just use the formula. So we take the x's, 2 minus -1 squared plus 1 minus 0 squared. So that's 3 squared, or 9, plus 1 squared is 1. So this is the square root of 10 between A, B. Now let's look between B, C. We're going to find the distance, and it's 2 minus 1 squared plus 1 minus -2 squared. So that equals the square root of 2 minus 1 is 1, squared is 1. 1 minus -2 is 3, squared is 9, square root of 10. So now we know these two sides are congruent. We're going to try CD. The distance is, and we'll take the difference of the x's, so 1 minus -2 squared plus -2 minus -3 squared. Square root of 1 minus -2 is the same thing as 1 plus 2, squared is 9, plus -2 minus -3 is the same thing as -2 plus 3, so that's 1, squared is 1. So that's congruent also. And then we're going to take the distance from D to A. So we're going to do the square root of -2 minus -1 squared plus -3 minus 0 squared. -2 minus a -1, same thing, -2 plus 1 is -1, squared is 1. -3 minus 0 is -3, squared is 9, square root of 10. So it's a quadrilateral if all four sides are congruent, and that is called a rhombus. So the proof is all the numbers that we used. We showed all the sides were congruent, therefore it's a rhombus. That's the end of the lesson.